Okay.
Awesome.
Okay, letting everybody in. Okay, hi everyone, welcome. I'm just letting everybody into the meeting now. We'll give everyone a few minutes to come on in. A few more people. Thank you all for being here. And we're going to have more people trickle in as we get started. My name is Suzanne Grossman. I direct the Career Services Office for the Marxe School of Public and International Affairs at Baruch College. Welcome. My colleague Marnie Smith is here. He's waving. It's the two of us in our office, and we've been running this career series. Today is our second session. We're happy to have the ACLU with us. I'm going to give you all really quickly the link in the chat box to the rest of the series, just so you can see, and I'll repeat this at the end, so if you miss it, just so you can see and sign up. Tomorrow we have the Peace Corps, we have CUNY, we have the UN Agencies series on Friday, and some more events next week. So we hope you can join us for as many events as possible. Let's see. We're at 41. So I think at this point I will, we're actually just point your attention to our colleagues today from the ACLU, Adrián Nava and Meghan Hoffman. Those are going to be our two main speakers. The way we're going to run the event is that they will speak about the ACLU, give you an overview, talk about the hiring, and you can put your questions in as we go into the chat box, and we will save the questions for a little bit later. And so, but feel free as the presentation goes along to list out your questions as they come. Right now, I want to do a brief poll to get an understanding of who's in the audience. Let me launch that poll. Let's see in just a second. So if you could take a quick moment, I see people responding. A few more responses coming in. Okay, that looks like all the responses. So I'm going to end the poll and share the results. Do you all see the results? Marnie, do you see the results?
I can see a little button that says tap to view results. So I can see 78% are graduate students in here.
Right, and we have about 20% are alumni of graduate programs. So that's helpful.
Cool.
Okay. So now let me turn it over to Adrián. And Adrián, would you like to introduce yourself, and we'll let you take the floor.
Yeah, thank you. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. It's actually still morning for me. I'm coming to you from my parents' home in Colorado. I ended up leaving last week, so I have been in self-isolation for going on 6 days now. It's such exciting stuff. So like Suzanne said, my name is Adrián. I work at the ACLU in our national HR department. We are based in New York, and I'm going to give you all a little bit of information about the ACLU in general, a tiny bit about how I got to the ACLU and my hiring process for the ACLU, and then an overview of current opportunities that we have in terms of careers, internships, and fellowships if any of you are considering law school in the future. So as some of you might know, the ACLU was founded in 1920. We've been around for 100 years. We actually just celebrated our first 100 years in January. And for the last 100 years, the ACLU has worked on making sure that we protect civil liberties for every person in the United States. To that end, we have created and have formed a coalition cohort network of 54 affiliate offices across the country. And we operate out of 4 national offices. Our main office is in New York City. We have a legislative / political arm that operates mostly out of DC. We have an office in San Francisco that houses some of our legal projects, and then a national office in Durham, North Carolina. And so the ACLU works mostly on civil liberties, civil rights issues, both in the courts through litigation, and then more recently through legislation, advocacy, people power, and direct action. The ACLU historically has been known as an organization that does mostly strategic litigation and big law. But the ACLU, I think, in the last few years has moved a lot towards doing a lot of direct action work, legislative work, advocacy work, which has expanded the types of opportunities we can offer to people who want to work at the ACLU. We have job opportunities just in about every single department that you can imagine, from digital tech and analytics to research, public policy, legislative work, legal work, IT work, HR work, operations work. The list goes on. And so in a little bit, I'm going to go over our career page and share my screen with you all to share a little bit about the career opportunities we have right now. We are still hiring, even though we're in the middle of a pandemic. Not surprisingly, folks are still accepting job opportunities because we are in a time of crisis and we want to make sure that folks have access to income and a job. And so because the federal government has sort of changed the regulations around I-9 verification, we are still able to verify people's documents to make sure that we can hire them. And so as of right now, we are still continuing to hire as normal, even though the process might be a little bit slower because we are all working remotely. So that's about, 500 people from our national offices that are now all remote. And so it's been quite a dramatic shift in the last couple of weeks to continue to hire as usual. Any questions before I move forward? And I know that Suzanne is fielding questions, but maybe we can save them towards the end if there's nothing now. But I came to the ACLU about 1.5 years ago. I applied first to be a paralegal with the LGBT and HIV project. I was a paralegal for a little over a year. And in that year, I worked on our federal litigation. And then I also did some work on our Supreme Court cases that we argued last October. After that, I moved to the HR department, and I'm now a program manager, and I primarily oversee our national internship programs, our mentorship program, and then I do some work on people analytics with our director of strategy and innovation. I'm going to share my screen with you all to go over careers, go over the hiring process, internship opportunities for graduate students, and any other information that might be helpful for you. Let me. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Yes. Great. So I think it's taking a while to load, but this is our careers page. It's aclu.org/careers. We have, as you can see, we have opportunities in every single department. This page will show opportunities at the national level, which will include, like I said, New York, DC, San Francisco, and North Carolina. But you can also filter our roles by state affiliate. We have 50 affiliates. Some of our states have multiple offices because the state is so big. And so, for example, Texas has an office in El Paso, Houston, and then Brownsville for folks that do specifically border-related work. We have an office in San Francisco. We have a Southern California office. And so when you're looking for jobs at the ACLU, the process will be different depending on where you apply. If you're applying to a state affiliate, that entire process will move through the state affiliate. If you're applying to a national office, which you can see right here, national office, then our team, our HR team, will handle all of the back end logistical work of making sure that we get your application, that the hiring manager sees it, and then we will often support the hiring manager in whatever questions they have when they're hiring for people. So right now, I'm not quite sure what the breakdown is of what folks on the call are studying or what you all studied. But we have director level roles and we have strategist roles for our political department. We're hiring for a chief communications officer. We're hiring, right now we're hiring a lot of digital tech and analytics. So we're hiring data scientists, digital engagement folks. We're hiring engineers, deputy directors for a lot of our political divisions, and a lot of organizing roles. And so these are all the roles that are open right now. If you scroll down further, you'll see that we have posted legal fellowship opportunities. I'm not sure if anybody here is currently in law school, but we offer year-round fellowships for 1 to 2 years at the ACLU. Usually, the student will apply to the ACLU. We accept the application after an interview process, and then the student will apply for funding outside of the ACLU, and we will house that student for 1 to 2 years. The further you scroll, the more you'll see that there are a bunch of opportunities open. And then the lower we go, we'll see that we have a lot of opportunities in state affiliates. And so if you are interested in going back to your home state to work at the ACLU, you can apply to one of these roles. And I'm always happy to flag applications for folks. So if I have I have one question and I'll answer it right after I'm finished here. If I have had a conversation with you through a webinar or a career fair, or if we've met online and you email me at my email or at the internships email, I will flag that application for you just to make sure that there's another touch since we had contact with you once. I'm going to go through our internships page quickly, and then I'll answer this question. So internships, we have a year-round internship program that offers internships at the graduate and undergraduate level. For example, right now we're hiring interns in our archives department. We're hiring 2 graduate interns to do a lot of our diversity, equity, and inclusion work, both in New York. Graduate interns for our policing department, a graduate research internship, a graduate affiliate support nationwide initiatives internship, and the list goes on. And so some of these are open only to graduate students, some of them are open only to legal students, and some of them are open only to undergrad students. But a good chunk of these are open to any level that you are in right now. So our IT internships, our digital tech and analytics internships are open to any level of education. And then the process for that is similar to the process when you apply to a job at the ACLU. We receive your application, the hiring manager oversees the hiring process. If they need extra support, they'll contact me. If I've been in contact with you, I'll flag your application for them so that they can have a second look at it or make sure that they look at it. And then you'll do probably a phone screen, maybe a Zoom interview, and then an offer will be extended if you're the person that they've chosen for the internship. Our internships are paid. And so if you are currently in school and you are looking for an internship that is paid, we offer a $7,500 stipend to graduate interns who intern at the ACLU. If you are receiving course credit for your internship, then that is the way you will be compensated through your university via course credit. But if your school doesn't offer course credit for your internship and you don't have outside funding, then the ACLU will offer a full stipend. If for some reason your funding is less than $7,500, then the ACLU will make up the difference and you will be paid the same amount as any other intern at the ACLU. Our internships run for 10 weeks and they typically run out of one of our national offices, depending on where your department is housed. Mostly it'll be New York or DC. if you apply for an internship this summer and you don't get an offer, we offer internships in the fall and in the winter as well. And so the internships at the ACLU are year-round in every single department. Let's see, I'm going to answer this question, and then I'm going to hand it over to my colleague Megan to talk about what her experience was like when she applied to work at the ACLU. Megan works in our development department, and she can share more about what that experience was like. So let's see. I have a question about whether we, for our advocacy positions with titles of associate director or deputy director, do we accept applications from folks with education background in social work and field experience? Yes, we do. So there are often, we're trying to get to a point where we don't have a lot of education requirements on our job description so that we can value life experience and field experience, and areas like social work. I know that, for example, for our diversity, equity, and inclusion internships right now, our chief equity and inclusion officer is looking for social work students specifically to have that social work lens at the ACLU. And so we value a breadth of experience. I have a question on organizing structure. Yes, I will share my email address, and yes, new grads can still be considered for internships. You don't have to be currently in school to apply for an internship. Do we know if these internships will move towards virtual capacity in New York? We are still figuring out whether our summer internships will be virtual or not. Right now, we are moving forward as if they were going to be either in person or virtual. Like I mentioned earlier, the I-9 restrictions have sort of been shifted a little bit, and so we will continue to be able to pay all of our interns. And so it really eliminates a lot of barriers to having us host an internship program for the summer. I'm going to pause on questions and let Megan take lead, and then Suzanne will do the wonderful job of making sure that we compile some of these questions and answer them in bulk at the end of the session.
Thanks, Adrian and Suzanne and Marnie. And hi, everyone. My name is Meghan Hoffman. My pronouns are she, her. I'm currently the Assistant Director of the National ACLU Strategic Partnerships Program. And in June of last year, I graduated with my MPA from Baruch. I've actually been at the ACLU since 2015, and I've gone through now what I call, I would say, 3 versions of the hiring process. So I'll talk really briefly about all of those, and then happy to open up to questions as well. So I started at the ACLU in 2015, in June of 2015, and I began in our development department, that's our fundraising department, as an associate at the associate level for kind of our general donor operations. So that included everything from directly speaking with donors, stewarding their relationship and their donations to the ACLU, and then working also on some of our internal infrastructure. And then with the approach of the 2016 election, the organization was building up in a lot of ways, as I'm sure many of you, your organizations did as well. And a new program was launched, our Strategic Partnerships program, in the wake of the 2016 election. And I applied for a manager position within that team and went through a pretty lengthy process. And I should note that also my original hiring process was also fairly lengthy back in 2015. I started working with this brand new unit, the Strategic Partnerships unit, in January of 2018. And just for context, we currently work with companies who want to financially support the ACLU and also work with the ACLU from an advocacy position. So companies getting involved in taking positions on civil rights and civil liberties issues. And then most recently, I advanced through that team into an assistant director role and started that position in February of last year. I can definitely say that the ACLU has done a phenomenal job of really improving that timeline, the hiring timeline, and being really responsive to applicants. I've also just gone through with my team an internship hiring process. We hired our first intern ever this year in January, which was great. We were so happy to have her on board, and are now sort of working through dealing with that position in a remote way, which is a learning experience for all of us. But I absolutely want to commend Adrián and our HR partners for really making that process, really improving that process and being really responsive with applicants and with hiring teams. So I also, well, I'll pause there too, in case folks want to ask specific questions or hand it back to our Baruch colleagues to lead us along.
Are there specific questions for Megan that folks have? Yeah, you have a question about any open positions in strategic partnerships.
That is a great question. I know that we had hoped to have a position open up this next fiscal year. Our fiscal year runs from April to March 31st, April 1st to March 31st. I think that, like a lot of organizations, and maybe Adrián can speak to this as well, we are sort of looking at everything that's coming down the pike given COVID-19 crises. And so I think that some of those positions are maybe in question at the moment, but like Adrián showed, those are actively living on our hiring page when they become available and approved.
That's right.
I think some of the questions were about the structure. So, you know, the difference between a strategist versus an associate versus a director. And I think I have worked with students myself. I'm trying to study some of the ACLU positions, and I think there's always that question of, you know, is a position too high a level for me to be applying for? Is it too junior? And sort of can you help people understand kind of the structure of the titles and where they know where to fit in? And is, you know, there was someone who had asked about, should they wait till they graduate and have their degree first? Yeah, just helping people figure out where can they come into the organization based on experience in school.
Yeah. Megan, do you want me to start, or
Yeah,
do you
that's
want
great.
to?
Go for it.
Yeah. So it really depends on department. Some of the departments have sort of like titles that are equivalent to something else in a different department. Like Megan, I also transitioned roles at the ACLU, and I was also, like many of you, wondering if my experience was too little or too much. Really, I was worried that it was too little, and I was like, should I really apply to this? But I looked at the job description, and I figured out that there were areas that my paralegal job, even though it was sort of like an administrative support role, would fit into a manager role. And so I used that as like selling points when I applied to the new role. I knew that I did not have the management experience that I needed to be a program manager at the ACLU, but I knew that a lot of my job was managing attorneys day to day and making sure that they hit their deadlines, that they submitted briefs on time, that we filed things in court, that we followed up on depositions and arguments. And so I sort of pivoted that and used that to my advantage. From an outside in, there are jobs that will ask for specific years of experience. I would not look too closely at that. I wouldn't, if a strategist job, for example, in NPAD, which is our political department, says to be a campaign strategist, you need 6 years of experience. I wouldn't wait 6 years to apply for a campaign strategist job. I would actually apply 1 to 2 years out of school if you've been doing a lot of campaign, advocacy, legislative internship work, and even maybe a little bit of work after school. Because by the time that you're 6 years out, I think you're probably more in like an associate director role instead of a strategist role at the ACLU. So take in the experience you have from from your graduate study time and from your undergraduate time and your internships and add that in. The worst that can happen is that you don't get a job at the ACLU yet. The best thing is that we have a new hiring system where we can track your application over time. And so if you apply for a strategist role now, and then you apply for a different role in a couple of years, we'll be able to see that progression, and we'll be able to flag that for our hiring managers and let them know that this is a person who has applied twice or 3 times, and that by this time they are ready for a specific role. But I wouldn't let the associate versus strategist throw you off. I would read the job description closely and figure out what kind of experience you have that lends itself to that. I know that when I applied for this program manager role, I sort of felt like I was underqualified. But the more conversations I had with folks, the more I realized that it was actually a great growing opportunity for me at the ACLU, and so I applied anyway. I don't know, Megan, did you have a similar or different experience?
Yeah, I would definitely echo that. I think that Adrian's spot on. It's really team dependent. But at the same time, I really want to echo the piece of the ACLU valuing life experience in our hiring process. I think that's really, really important. And I've seen that play out in so many people joining the organization, especially in this time where we've been really building up and building out as an organization. I think too, you know, one of my favorite pieces of I'll also say that when I started at the ACLU, obviously I was working full time. When I started at Baruch, I did the part-time program. I did the part-time program the whole way through. And being able to use real world experience in both of those tracks. So using what I was working on at Baruch, you know, in my real time, in my job I'm sure many of you are doing this, you know, in your current work as well, and did this throughout your studies at Baruch. But I really found the ACLU a really applicable place to apply that work. And then the other thing I'll say is that one of my favorite learnings from Baruch came out of my management classes, where we talked and really dug into some of the data around how frequently folks count themselves out from a job description just because, you know, I don't fit 3 of the bullets they have listed, and maybe that's management experience or years in the field, or maybe, you know, maybe I have that social work background, but not direct field organizing or something like that. And that so often just the fact of not submitting an application because of those 3 bullet points can be far more significant in keeping folks from reaching the interview level, from obtaining the job. So I would absolutely encourage you, if you think your experience fits, if you think your experience, you know, maybe it doesn't have that that exactly right specific title or that those number of years that are listed in a job description, for instance, I would still absolutely recommend, you know, putting yourself forward and explaining why your narrative, why your experience fits that role and that job description, because I think that the ACLU is definitely a place where that's taken into consideration, and really it is a part of the review process.
Great. There's a couple of questions about the work culture at ACLU. Can you give us a sense? And one piece of that, someone was asking about the pace. Is it fast-paced environment, or does that depend on the department? So a little bit about the culture.
Megan,
I'm happy
do you
to
go first?
Yeah, sure. I'm happy to jump into that. Specifically, I think I can speak to the difference between 2015's ACLU and 2020's ACLU, which sort of feels like a different organization in a lot of ways. You know, I think that many of you may remember after the 2016 election, the ACLU was suddenly everywhere, whether it was on the front lines of the Muslim ban to family separation. You know, the ACLU experienced this incredible growth overnight. And I think that really it was something that we had to learn from really rapidly, and are still learning those lessons today. So it's definitely we've become, I feel like, a really almost crisis response organization these days, that there are a lot of a lot of fights being fought across the waterfront of civil liberties and civil rights issues. And it seems like there's never a day that we're out of the news cycle. That can get really fast paced, and I don't want to sugarcoat that for folks. I think internally we are doing a lot of really good work to understand what impact that has on staff members and on teams, because obviously it's it can be exhausting at times, it can be overwhelming at times, and so I think the organization is doing a really good job of learning about the internal impact of that and making sure we're taking care of ourselves as well.
Adrian, anything more to say about culture?
Well, I came to the ACLU after 2016, and so I started right in the middle of what my boss likes to call a 100-year-old startup. Like, we're 100 years old, but we have increased in staff size by 70% in the last 2 or 3 years, and so that is a lot of learning to do really, really quickly. My experience in the legal department was sometimes like a roller coaster of things to do. And then it would slow down a little bit after we filed something big. When I talk to folks who want to be paralegals at the ACLU, I remind them that the ACLU does federal litigation and is often in front of the Supreme Court, which means that you are the paralegal, you are the person, you and your team are the ones in charge of making sure that all of that happens pretty seamlessly and perfectly. And so leading up to preparation to the Supreme Court argument in October, May, June, and July, I was working from 8 a.m. to like 1 a.m. The ACLU's paralegals and legal assistants and folks in the development, some folks in the development department are part of a union. And so every time that you are asked to work overtime, it is first your decision if you want to work overtime or not. And then number two, you are paid for that overtime work. You are paid for dinner. You are paid for an Uber or taxi home. And so the ACLU makes sure that, we take care of folks when we are asking them to work extra hours if we have a long case. But that is not typical, but it does happen. And so if folks are applying for the legal department specifically, please know that you are sort of at the front line of what the organization does. And you might be asked to be working late nights and some weekends. In the HR department, the work culture is different because we are dealing with, like Megan said, sort of like a crisis response method. And so we're not really thinking about strategic litigation in HR. We're thinking about what do our employees need day to day? What do we need to do for the internship program, for the mentorship program? How can we offer wellness and benefits? And so it's a pretty different culture, but still really, really exciting. And I love every single day.
Great. There was a couple questions about benefits. Do you want to highlight a few of the employee benefits, and is there tuition assistance for grad students?
We don't offer tuition assistance for graduate students. Folks who are in the collective bargaining unit do have an education fund for every week that they are in the union. I'm not quite sure what the details of it are, but if you are a member of the union, you receive an education assistance fund, a professional development fund. I do believe the HR department has professional development funds for everybody at the ACLU. So that includes trainings, webinars, conferences, specific skills you want to learn, and you would do that through the HR department. I am not in charge of benefits, and so I'm not sure what the details are. I work in sort of like the strategy and innovation sector of the HR department. So I can't really speak to all the benefits that the ACLU offers in detail.
Okay. We're getting a question about international students. Does the ACLU sponsor visas and or do you accept people on OPT in that year after they graduate when they have the work authorization? Yeah.
Again, that's not the area of HR that I work in, and so I'm not sure what the guidelines are around the ACLU sponsoring students for visas. For the internship program, if somebody is eligible to work in the United States and wants to be paid through the ACLU, then we can do that. And so if somebody has like deferred action or is a resident or on TPS or whatever the case is, and they have a work permit, then we will pay them. If the student is an international student and they want to intern at the ACLU, they can still intern at the ACLU at the undergraduate or graduate level. We would just have to work with the university to offer course credit or outside funding through the school.
And the paralegal positions, do you see those as ones, are the folks in those, you know, because there's a lot of graduate students here right now, and they're in, you know, policy degrees, some social work, but I'm just wondering, is the paralegal role designed for someone who doesn't have a master's degree yet, or is it kind of open and there's all kinds of people with different backgrounds in those positions?
That's a good question. Historically, the ACLU had career paralegals, and after 2016, I think that the ACLU moved towards having the paralegal role really be a learning opportunity for people who want to pursue a graduate degree or pursue something else. And so for the graduate students on this call, I would probably recommend something in our National Political and Advocacy Department that would offer a lot more growth, because the paralegals usually will stay here for 2 to 3 years and then move on to law school or a graduate program, or move abroad. And really it's meant to be sort of like a foundation for people so that then they can move forward and do other things.
There's a question about, if people see more than one position to apply to, sometimes people worry it'll you know, what happens on your end? Like, say they're like, well, I see 2 or 3 roles, but is it going to look, are people going to know that I applied for 3 jobs and wonder why I'm applying for 3 different roles? How is that viewed at the back end?
Yeah, well, it depends on the application. So if a person applies for 3 roles and they just switched out the name of the department and then the rest of it is the exact same, it will be difficult for us to figure out which role you're interested in. But there are people, and there are interns, and there are people who apply for jobs that are genuinely interested in a lot of different areas that the ACLU works in. And so, for example, if you apply for a role in the LGBT project, you might also want to work in the Women's Rights Project, and you might also want to work in the Reproductive Freedom Project. If you apply to work in policing, you might also be interested in capital punishment and in drug reform. And so we encourage people to apply to all the roles that they are interested in, but really make the application about that specific role and why you're interested in that role, so that hiring managers know that this is the role that you want. And it doesn't count against you if you apply to several. If you are applying for one role and you're a better fit for a different role, hiring managers will often email us so that we can transfer an application to a different job posting, so that then they can reach out to that person and say, you apply for this analytics role, you might be better for this tech role. Would you be interested in applying for this one instead?
Got it. Let's see what else we have. A specific question about if someone, is there a department focused on immigrant rights, a specific department on that topic?
We have our Immigrant Rights Project, and they have, I'm not sure what positions they have open right now. They were just hiring for paralegals. But specifically in our NPAD department, the National Political Department, we have 3 different sort of divisions. We have a democracy division, a liberty division, and an equality division. And within the democracy division is where we house our immigrant rights work. So this person who's asking about immigrants' rights work would probably apply to the National Political Department, and then they would get to do a bunch of different work: immigrants' rights, human rights, national security rights, national security project, among other things.
I'll just add to that. I think that, yeah, I know it can be sort of seem like a huge organization, and it is, and a little bit confusing when we're talking about different projects. When we kind of name these broad umbrella projects, like our Immigrants' Rights Project, we're typically speaking primarily about the legal work. So, you know, filing on behalf of immigrants, you know, arguing court cases, that type of thing. And on the advocacy side, which Adrian was just discussing, those are more of the opportunities where, whether at the federal level or in many states' cases, getting to work directly with, you know, building coalitions on the ground, doing other types of advocacy work, that type of thing. That's within that democracy division of our political advocacy wing.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. There was a question about the development department. How big is the development department? We know a couple of alums there. And if someone was new to development, kind of where would they come in?
Yeah, that's a great question. Our National Development Department has grown, like the rest of the organization, by leaps and bounds. I'd have to look at our current numbers, but I know we are nationally at about, I want to say around 80 folks, just within the development and the fundraising unit. I think that there are a lot of opportunities for coming into development. I personally came into development completely naive. When I started in an associate's role, I had worked in other nonprofits and had definitely overlapped with some fundraising elements, but had not done that work in a formal capacity full time, and certainly had not worked as a frontline fundraiser as I am right now. And so I think that coming in an associate's role in a really general position, which was a development operations type of associate, was a really great way for me to not only get to know fundraising, but really get to know the organization. I got to learn so much about our different legal program work, about you know, how our advocacy work, our organizing work was developing over my first few years there. And then obviously just getting to know the internal structures really well. And so I absolutely advocate that. I think that the ACLU has like one of, if not the currently largest membership programs in some of these civil rights, civil liberties related organizations. And so from a fundraising perspective, that is like our main sort of like our broad base fundraising program. That's the program that I was under when I first started. And I think that there are, I would say, regular openings through that channel. That would be a great avenue. We also have specific fundraising teams for, obviously my team is corporate fundraising. We also have planned giving, which works with people's estates and wills, things of that nature. We have different programs, different teams working on mid-level and major level gifts. So $10,000 gifts up to $100,000 gifts. We also have leadership level gifts, which those are above the $100,000 donations. There are a lot of different, you know, avenues for folks to join in and learn about fundraising.
I have a question which people haven't asked, but in terms of the shift of everyone working at home, is that something people were already doing, and was the organization prepared for that, or did people have to acclimate to our current situation?
I'll speak for myself. I don't know how Adrian feels. I was actually shocked with how quickly we got everybody online and working from home. Again, I think that sort of speaks to we're a 100-year-old organization, and maybe I just didn't expect it to go that quickly. But that said, I will say that a lot of staff have, actually most staff now, and certainly all staff, by the time we finish this remote working period, everyone has you know, work provided laptops, which are, you know, able to connect to our networks, making work from home really easy. For me personally, it's been a pretty simple process. Fundraisers travel a fair amount, so my team has been equipped to work remotely for quite some time now. I think that probably hasn't been everybody's experience. I know that a lot of our fundraising colleagues who, for instance, go through the mail to, you know, receive donor checks and actually process those, are still working through some pain points in this remote period.
And do you expect to hire fully remotely? Like if right now, like, do you imagine a hiring manager would virtually interview someone and then make an offer, or would those be on hold until after this period? I don't know if you know, or maybe it's dependent on the hiring manager. Adrian, is that something?
Yeah, it sort of depends on the position. We have continued to hire folks. We have a new onboarding orientation tomorrow, I think. And so people are still accepting their offers. Typically, and Megan, let me know if this was different than your experience, but in both of my experiences in hiring at the ACLU, I did a phone screen, and then I did like a skills analysis test. So for this program manager role, I built out a program and then I sent it over. And then I did a couple interviews, well, not a couple, but like a couple series of interviews. And that process took maybe like 1.5 to 2 months. And so I imagine that some hiring managers will be able to administer things like a skills assessment and do Zoom interviews without being fully in person, but it will really depend on the team and how comfortable they are hiring somebody knowing that they're going to be coming into a completely remote work environment. And so if we have positions that are sort of set for FY21, fiscal year 21, we might hold on those for a little bit until we figure out what's happening. And then for the positions that are already posted, I imagine that a lot of those hiring managers will continue to try to get those positions filled.
Yeah, and I'll say too, I think somebody had this question, what did I mean by a lengthy hiring process back in 2015? It actually went on for like 4 months.
Oh my God.
Maybe. It was lengthy. But in my more recent experiences, when I joined the strategic partnerships team as a manager and then advanced to the assistant director position, when I came and was totally switching teams and joined as a manager, I also went through the skills assessment and then multiple interviews. And those are really great, you know, getting to speak to a hiring manager directly, and then a few other roles that, you know, directly would work with this new potential role. I agree with Adrian. I think that a lot of these review processes can be done virtually at this point. But as you can imagine, I'm sure it varies by team based on whether folks think that, you know, hiring for this role is possible virtually.
Okay. So I know there's still some questions trickling in. And I want to be mindful of, you know, maybe not everyone can stay. Adrian and Megan, can you take a couple more?
Sure.
I'm also going to put in the chat again a reminder about the rest of our series for people. I'm just putting in the link so you can see and sign up for the rest. Adrian, you said you were willing to share your contact information. Is that accurate?
Yes. Yeah, happy to do that.
That too.
Yeah, so I'll share my email if folks have any additional questions. I don't work in our operations division of hiring, and so some of your questions I might not have answers to. But if you have any questions related to graduate level internships, I can answer all of those. And then
thank you for that, for offering your contact info to everyone.
Do you want me to, Susan, do you want me to put it in the general?
Sure.
Yeah.
You send it to everybody. If you need help with that, I can also put it in there. Okay, I see it. Is that the one you want to give people as the internships one?
Yeah, for internships, that would be the one.
Someone's asking about LinkedIn. How do you feel about LinkedIn connections?
Sure.
Megan, any thoughts on LinkedIn?
Yeah, and I'll also add my ACLU email here. I'm happy to hear from folks just to talk about Baruch or, you know, switching into a new area of work or other work that the ACLU is doing. I'm not connected to the HR process, so forgive me if I don't have that information for you, but happy to connect, and happy to do LinkedIn Connects as well.
Great. If anybody misses any of this in the chat functions today, I will also send a follow-up email to participants from today, so you can make sure you have that information as well. I think on that note, we can yeah, we'll stop here. You're getting a lot of thank yous coming in. We're very appreciative. You know, ACLU does a lot of hiring for roles that are interesting to our students, and so it's great to have this sort of inside information about the process, and to hear that you are actively very much hiring. We're all happy to hear that. Yeah. So thank you all. I hope to see everyone on some of our future calls, and have a great rest of your day. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.